So we are ready to start. Your Excellencies, Prime Ministers, distinguished participants. My name is Andrejs Vasiljevs. I'm head of Latvian software company Tilde and Vice President of Latvian Information Communication Technology Association. And I'm very honored to moderate this discussion, where we have a unique opportunity to have top policy makers and some of the brightest minds of this region sitting around one table to discuss topic of the digital agenda. And I think we would have this discussion some 10 years ago. It most likely would be quite different. We would most likely talk about access, how to make computers available and internet accessible to everybody. But now, thanks to major efforts by governments and private sector, a majority of businesses and most of households enjoy access to computers and internet and use them daily. And we see that new generation has born, generation of digital natives, those for whom online information, tweeting, social networking are intrinsic part of their life, and this actually transforms our society. These people are not just consumers of the information anymore, but rather active and also demanding participants. And this poses new challenges and opportunities for governments and all the sectors, and how governments should react to these changes, and actually how governance should be adapted, how to unleash the power of data collected by government institutions and other public institutions, and what effect have new technologies on all the areas of our life, and particularly on our language and our culture. These are some of the topics what we are going to discuss at this session with prominent speakers. And now I would like to introduce the first speaker, Joakim Jardenberg, founder and CEO of Mindpark. He's from Sweden, and he characterizes himself as a business angel and investor in early stage of technology startups, and he is a long-term internet evangelist, pundit, and netizen, whatever that word means. And he believes in freedom of expression and in the powers of online and in the democratization of the world. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to introduce myself also with the words that I'm not here to sell anything. I'm not here as my business persona. I'm here more as a passionate citizen, not a stakeholder with an agenda or to make anyone buy anything. On the contrary, I would actually rather see that you spend less and do more. So my take here is that e-gov, the term and the phrase e-gov, should be understood as efficient, economical, and evolving government. One major problem in the current discussions of this term is the focus on specific and dedicated ICT solutions. We seem to have an obsession with technology as such. And surely those specific systems are needed. A modern administration must be digitized on many levels. But I think the focus should rather be on all that can be achieved by means of already commonly used technology. So e-gov should really be about leveraging the possibilities at hand, not constructing an endless array of new and expensive initiatives. I'd say it's time for a reality check. And for that reality check, I've digged up 4 human trends and attitudes, changing attitudes that I think are relevant for our time. So let's start with little baby girl Iris. She's 11 months old. And the first thing we see in this short clip of Iris is that she actually can't even stand on her feet yet. But she can already master the device. So in some respect, I think we can say that it's actually, it's better designed than her own body, and that's pretty interesting. But what really made this possible, what we see here, is probably the fact that no one told little Iris that this was supposed to be difficult. No one said that you have to read the manual before you try this out. And I think we can learn a lot from that. We can learn a lot from the fact that more than 50% of Swedish 3-year-olds are actively using internet today. And it's not just them. I mean, we see an impressive activity in the older groups as well. More than 35% of the people in Sweden aged 75 and older are actively using internet today. So it is a big thing. The borders between online and offline are rapidly declining. And with all respect to the digital chasm and the diffusion of innovation, the notion of zero friction gives our society a whole new set of challenges and possibilities. The second trend or human attitude is what I like to call the social bug. I mean, we all know about social networks. For instance, I know of a 70-year-old woman who actually changed from one doctor to another because the previously one wasn't on Facebook and didn't want to communicate with her on Facebook. So she made a radical decision. We also seen what's happening in the Arab Spring. I've been working down there myself for a couple of times. And it's really interesting to see how the power of social makes it possible to do things that wasn't possible before. It's really about an enabling force that comes out of connecting more than 2 billion people, as we do right now, in pairs or in masses. We shouldn't consider it as a numbers game. It's really enough if two people who previously didn't know about each other can find each other and communicate. And we see that power come to life. The third is actually about the one machine, as I like to call it. And let's see if we can have some sound here.
$75,000 2012 Gordon E. Moore Award in the category of Medicine and Health Sciences for the Crown
Jack is just going to continue to screaming, so I'm going to save you from this. But go to YouTube and Google Jack Andraka and see this whole clip at some time and read up on Jack Andraka. So he's 15 years old and he wins a big competition in the States. And the prize he gets is because he found a new way to detect, well, he's really excited. Actually, Jack Andraka has promised that when he receives the Nobel Prize, he's going to do cartwheels up on stage. So we're going to hold him accountable to that. But what he's done is that he has found a new way to detect pancreatic cancer. And this new way, it's 168 times faster than the old way. It's 400 times more sensitive. It's 26,000 times cheaper than the old way. And he's 15 years old. He did this while chilling out in class. So the teacher was there talking about something. He was here thinking about stuff and Googling. He's very clear that he couldn't have achieved what he has done if it wasn't for Google and the power of information out there. So what we're doing is that we're collaboratively building this massive machine of information and communication. And with every screen constantly connected to that machine, we're basically becoming the all-knowing man, not seen since the times of Aristotle. That's amazing. That's power. And we see this collaborative working coming to play as well in something like Wikipedia. 11 years ago, no one would have believed me if I say, let's build an encyclopedia that everyone can edit without even being logged in. I mean, you would have thought me to be crazy, right? The wisdom of crowd was basically just a theory before we saw this happen. But now we see it, and it's amazing power in practice. So collaboration and participation is coming back to our society again, enabled by global technology. So these 4 technologies, these 4 cornerstones are building blocks for modern government, utilizing the common powers of today's society. It also forces in a good way our states to be listening, transparent, progressive, and efficient. And based on the cornerstones, I see stuff like open research, open education, open communication, open data, to name only a few possibilities, make a real change for the better if we let them. Basically covering all the sub-themes of addressing the digital divide. But I also see a couple of things that could be done right now. So based on these 4 keys, here are 4 things that you can go home and start doing tomorrow. Make sure that we get access to internet everywhere, all the time, as fast as possible, with as low friction as possible. Can anyone tell me why we have to log into the internet connection at this place? Can anyone please explain what's the reasoning behind that? It's just stupid. So let's get rid of all the friction, and also let's get rid of the idea that we should regulate what's happening online. One of the reasons that internet took off as it did was the fact that it was open and unregulated. So let's not destroy what we have, regardless of the wishes of the Hollywood mob. Access to technology. Devices are cheap today, still they're not accessible to everyone. We have a big focus on schools and the students in schools. Well, let's expand that to everyone. Why should we just put devices in the hands of the students when we have a massive amount of need of devices out there? That's a good way to overcome the digital divide for real. And then there's access to common resources, the public sector information and so forth. I'm not going to dwell on that because we have a speaker later on who's going to dig into that matter, but it's extremely crucial, not just for making money and evolving the markets, but also for saving democracy in this time of decline of traditional media. We need the safeguard of openness. And then there's access to the world. We already have frameworks in place for this. The EU has done some excellent work on listing the key competencies that we need for the learning society. And language is one of those. So I would just like to say we need to focus on making sure that the mindset is on access to the world. So, to conclude, I would like to say that our governing forces need to engage more in everyday technology, in the 4 foundations, to realize the possibilities and take action. Don't let ICT staff dictate policies, please. Don't let big corporations sell you expensive stuff that you don't need. And don't do complicated when you can do simple. To again refer to Aristotle, what we have to learn to do, we learn by doing. So start tweeting people. You can understand these issues, I promise. Maybe not quite as well as 11-month baby girl Iris, but good enough to make informed and good policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your inspiring presentation. And actually, I mean, instead of having 3 presentations in a row, let's have about 5 minutes for questions or immediate comments, and then after then we will follow with the next presentations, and after all 3 presentations, we will still have time for to discuss the things presented by the speakers. So, are there any comments, questions?
Yeah, my name is Pekka Soini. I'm coming from Finland, heading Teke's Innovation Funding Agency there. And thank you very much, Joakim. This is excellent, eye-opening. And what we have been considering a little bit connection to that is that what about our current teaching and education, classroom education and so forth? Are our teachers up to date when the next generation is coming? And even people who are in universities now kind of studying to teachers, to become teachers. So are we behind already to the curve and radically behind? And that's something what needs to be radically actually changed in terms of universities, professors, curriculum in universities, how you teach teachers. These people are coming very soon, totally different mindset like this Irish. I mean that the current 7, 8 years old people, they are totally different than current teachers in classrooms.
Just to build on that, I think the most important issue when it comes to the academy is to actually get a notion of reversed mentorship and reversed learning. I mean, the teachers should be big and smart enough and intelligent enough to realize that there are issues and there are specific areas where the students probably know a lot more than they do. So let's get them involved instead. Let's make a true democratization of how the academy works. I think that is the single biggest thing that we can try and do. It's all about the mindset.
Yeah, and also let's make the video recordings of the best lecturers in the world available, accessible to everyone. That's really changing the way how people educate. Any other comments or questions? If not, we will have time to discuss after presentations. And so now let's move on to the next presentation. And this presentation will be delivered by Hjalmar Gislason from Iceland. He's CEO of DataMarket and technology enthusiast and serial entrepreneur. And he's a popular speaker at different technology events, offering a mix of business strategy and technical expertise. And his company is basing on a vision for making the world's data easier to find, access, and understand. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anders. My name is, as was said, Hjalmar Gislason. I'm the founder and CEO of this company, DataMarket. I'm going to elaborate a little bit on one subject that was touched upon by Joakim, which is that of open data and access to common resources. It's actually a topic that's that I've been quite keen on. I've been advocating for open access to data for 6 or 7 years. That's a few years before it became a business interest of mine. I think that my advocating for that in Iceland, for that, I think I can take some credit for that. In the new draft that we have of a new constitution, there is actually a clause on information rights and open data access. And I know, as a fact, it's built largely on a blog post I wrote about 5 years ago. So I'm quite happy about that. Then in my professional work, what DataMarket is all about is we have a product that helps businesses, policymakers, and others to get access to the best possible data for their decision making and planning and so on. So again, this access is very important to what I'm trying to achieve there, but I won't dwell on that. So, first of all, before I kind of dive into this, and I actually won't be reading the list, what do I mean by data in this presentation? So, in work, we work with quantitative information mostly. So, any sort of numbers, any sort of quantitative information. But in the sense of kind of what I'm going to talk about here, data means pretty much anything, any sort of database, anything that makes sense to put in a table. That's kind of how I define it. Less so with kind of textual structures, working documents, and things like that, even though some of the same policies actually apply to those. Also, in the kind of general nature of the short presentation, I'm not going to dwell on things that have to do with privacy and security and so on. Let's just leave them out of the equation and talk about the things that are absolutely, there's no privacy risk, no security risk, no such issues to touch upon. It's just resources that are out there that could be used by so many more people than have access to them today. There are some very interesting gray areas in there, and they can be governed by many of the same policies, but we don't really have time to dive into that. So, health records, no. Aggregated data from health records, yes. That's kind of, you can use that distinction. And kind of going back to the slide, pretty much any government agency is collecting a lot of data. Either they have it as a part of their kind of defined role. We can think of Met offices, we can think of statistical offices, we can think of several institutions that are in the business. Their primary role is to collect data. But as a byproduct of pretty much any agency's work, there are also a lot of resources that are being built up. And I mentioned there are things like spending data, demographic data, fleet information, scientific databases, and so on. And the problem with this is that this data and all this data that is gathered is largely kind of locked down in silos within the respective organizations for several reasons. And some of them, I think often the main reason is people don't think anybody else can make anything out of this data. But that's because they are thinking about it just in the way it was thought about originally. Others actually don't even see the data, they don't even have the data, so how could they come up with ideas on how to use it differently? So what I'm here to tell you is that I titled this slide Untapped Value because I didn't kind of want to go with money for nothing. But the thing is that all this data has already been gathered. It's already there. The money has already been spent. So the resource has already been put together. But at the same time, kind of many of our laws still treat data and kind of policies treat data as something that resides on paper, something that's kind of something that's expensive to duplicate, expensive to disseminate, and so on. But the world has changed. It's actually happened. It happened 15, 20 years ago that this dissemination of this data became virtually free. So if you have the data in digital format on a computer, publishing it for the world is it's virtually free. And the fact is that there's more data out there than most of us actually realize, and the data that is kind of lying in these government databases is important to pretty much any household, any policymaker, any business out there. And there's a lot more of it than most of us realize. When I kind of started diving into this, as a business, I didn't know half of it, but already I saw an opportunity. There's so much good information in there that it's actually almost it's very hard to believe. But again, the data is hard to find, it's hard to use, it's hard to access, and so on. So the first step, obviously, to make it available, and that will create value through use and reuse. And I'm going to back that up with a few examples. So the three main benefits of opening up of resources is transparency, and transparency breeds trust in government and in the agencies that are opening up the data. It's innovation through unexpected and kind of unintended uses. And then better decisions, simply because people have access to the best available data. And I'll walk you through one example of each. In Canada, journalists had been fighting for access to data on tax policies that had to do with charities. So they wanted to see, because they felt that charity paybacks were higher than than seemed normal. When they finally got access to the data, and this was to begin with anonymized data. It just saw the numbers and so on, and they could point to a tax fraud of 3.2 billion Canadian dollars that had been going on for 5 years, and that's just by kind of opening up and kind of making that data transparent without giving out initially anything that that had any sort of privacy or security implications. Another kind of more positive note. When we started our company, one of the first things we did is we took the national budget and we took it away from the kind of paper structure that had been used to publish it for 50 years. And we just picked up the numbers and made it into an interactive chart where you can kind of click through and see the ministries and how they're spending their money. All of a sudden, 25,000 people, it's almost 10% of the population, is diving into kind of the national budget and is more informed now about kind of what are the big spending factors, what are the small ones. Cutting down in the foreign ministry won't help at all because it's only 1.8% of our overall spending to begin with. It's the 25% chunks of welfare and health system and kind of education and so on that you have to kind of find ways to do things better. So transparency, innovation. I think actually weather data is probably the best example of this, because we've largely had at least partially open data policies around weather data for a long time, and it's bred competition. We never think about this, but there is competition between media and how they present the weather data, and what they're doing, they're trying to attract audiences, and there is also a lot of innovation that happens on how you can predict the weather based on this data and so on. And finally, the better decisions. And I could kind of go on with several other examples there, but the better decisions. I want to take one personal how an individual can make better decisions based on open data. So in Iceland we have an agency, and pretty much every nation has an agency that collects mapping data, collects geographical information. And this has been a closed resource in most nations, but then it's kind of been opened up gradually. And just in the case of Iceland, the revenues that come, from the licensing of that data from the institution that does that is minuscule. It's somewhere in the 200,000 euro range per year that they get in licensing revenue. I would say that if we opened this data up and therefore had better maps in our GPS systems and Google Maps and so on, not having to save one tourist group from our highlands would probably save that money, and then that's just one case. Then everything on top of that is a benefit in addition. And then with businesses, we've been helping several businesses, kind of helping them find the resources and make better decisions and plans based on data. For example, an insurance company we work with, we help them take their data and then link that up with weather data again, traffic data, crime data, and a few other kind of public data sources that many of them weren't open when we started kind of going for that project. And in the end, they revamped their pricing strategy based on being able to link their own internal data up with some public resources. And they run their businesses more efficiently based on that. And actually, most of us have better policy rates because of that as well, because they found out that the risk models weren't quite right. So I'm actually not alone kind of with this line of thinking. So Obama took some big steps when he stepped in, in the UK, Tim Berners-Lee and actually the CTO, Liam Maxwell, is here with us today. He's been doing some good stuff there, and then obviously Hans Rosling. If you haven't seen his presentations, do so now. They're fantastic, and they do this. So I'll leave you with two recommendations. Make government data default open, and what I mean with that is that instead of the traditional thinking of data is closed unless you find a reason to open it up, just think about it exactly the other way. Data resources should be open unless you find reasons to close it. They can be privacy, they can be security, they can be a lot of reasons. There are a lot of reasons for not opening some of them, but just this, reversal of thinking will open up immense opportunities for new business, for better transparency and overall better government. And then secondly, hire your best and brightest. Recruit your best and brightest people to at least advise or even work on the IT policies and the IT kind of strategies for your countries. Modern companies all have a CTO role. It's one of the managemental roles, and modern governments have very much the same needs. So a modern government should have somebody in that role with a lot of power on their hands. So I'll leave it with that.
Thank you very much for this such strong advocacy to the opening data and unleashing power of the data. And any comments or questions to the speaker?
Yes, I just wanted to support Gislason point of view. I'm from Denmark. We just launched a report in Denmark where we actually have not only took those benefits that you mentioned with transparency, uninspected use and best available information, but also added the business case to your point of view. So we have set up the business case to actually open up a lot of the basic data that we have in the public sector in Denmark. So now, by the 1st of January, all our geographical data is opened up and for free for use. All our information about businesses, citizens, but not data related to privacy, but general data about that, real property as well. And show the business case where the benefits not only are for the public sector, growing to up to 40 million euros a year, but also by the use of private companies up to 100 million euros of savings a year. So there's also other benefits than just transparency to opening up the data.
Absolutely, and I think personally, I think one of the biggest one is what we cannot know, is what people will actually apply the information to do, because now they have access to it. Now they know these resources exist, and now they have the ability to play with them and so on. Think about the university student. A university student, as a part of their master's project or whatever, they will not start any project by paying even 100 euros for accessing some data resource. So you're limiting you're taking away, the resources already there. You're taking away a lot of kind of people in their kind of most creative time in their lives when they actually have time to kind of dwell on things like this. And they would be they will, and they have, and they will continue to come up with great ideas on how to apply this in new ways, and they will start businesses, they will hire people, and so we see a lot of kind of new business growth there.
Hi, yes, Niklas Sandström. So two questions. One is, what are the kind of challenges that you when you kind of propose these things? What are the kind of is it technical challenges you're meeting, or that people are concerned about other risks? What are the challenges?
Right. I would say that in general, perfectionism, or at least kind of implied perfectionism, is the number one excuse that people have. They don't want to put the data out as it is because it's wrong, or it's not in the right format, or they want to kind of spend more work. Let's start a project on finding the right format for publishing the data. You have this file on your computer, put it out there. That's the first step. And the second kind of part of the perfectionism is, especially in the academic sector, I worked a lot with the linguistic sciences institution, and for them, 99.9% correct is wrong. So, even though I could find ways to apply this data in numerous ways to kind of to improve online search, for example, they wouldn't want to put it out there because they knew that some words were wrongly categorized or something like that. And these are the most common objections that I hear.
So the other question I have is that, what about the reverse? So you've been talking about that, which I completely agree, by the way, that all the data should be that has any security or privacy issues should be by default open. But in many countries, specifically in the Nordics, the other type of information is actually available, privacy data.
Yep.
And that was also from a world when things were on paper and not easily searchable and comparable, but there's a lot of privacy data that are available in terms of people's incomes and where they're living and whatever they're doing, which is can be used in a bad way.
Yeah, absolutely. So my general take on it is that data should also be open to those that it should be open to, meaning that we as private citizens should have open access to anything that the government is, any records that the government is keeping on us. But we should also be able to not only, well, to some extent control, who gets access to that information, but also see who has accessed that information and how they've used it. So I think that there are reasons to open some of those resources up to third parties, but the people that are being looked up should definitely be notified. We can think about, credit information. You want to permit your bank to look up information for them to kind of assess your credit history, and a lot of that resides in public databases. So you should, that data should, that type of access should be possible, but it should not be possible by the bank without your authorization, or at least without a trace of that data having been looked up. So that's kind of my general take on it.
Okay. Thank you.
In Estonia, we are also following this principle, open by default. And those developments with the open data, they are going on. I'm not so much worried about those developments we have inside of the country. But I'm worried about those developments which we don't have, which have to develop relations between neighbors, between different countries. For example, approximately 20,000 paper documents are exchanged between Finnish and Estonian population register. 20,000. It means 20,000 people, they have to buy ferry tickets or airplane tickets. They have to waste their time traveling from Finland to Estonia, from Estonia to Finland, then to stay in long queues to get some paper documents. In Estonia, people they are using their ID cards, and then they can get all this information, or registers can get this information using so-called X-road system. We have relatively small different databases, and we can cross-use information through those databases. But Finnish register cannot use information which is allowed to use from Estonian register. Why it's so? Now we have 27 excellent regulations in the European Union dealing with IT issues. Those are really excellent regulations, but in fact those excellent regulations they are creating barrier between those 27 different EU member states. We have this X-road system. We can offer this software for free. Let's start somehow to change information through state registers. We will save huge amounts of money. We will save time of our taxpayers. I'm not able to understand why we didn't start with those developments yet.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, and I would point to that maybe a part of the problem is that the CTO role is not something that's defined everywhere. So this is something that would actually be happening at a gathering of the national CTOs, where they would kind of discuss the standards and how they can exchange this information and so on. So the thing is, because IT is relatively new, it's not centralized in any one position in a lot of governments, and I think that's a part of the problem. But it's a very good point.
Yeah, and thank you very much for this interesting discussion, and especially for this important point of removing barriers and exchanging information across EU countries. And we can see how governments and people and businesses can benefit from that. For example, in Latvia, we have created access to enterprise registers in other countries, and what helps businesses in Latvia to get information about their potential partners in other countries and to do business better and more secure, checking their business partners' background. But now let's move to the next important topic on what effect have these new technologies and this virtual world, what are overwhelming us on our culture and our linguistic identity. And this topic will be presented by Gabija Skučaitė from Lithuania. She is president of University of Applied Social Sciences, and she is also president of Association of Lithuanian Non-State Sciences and Higher Education Institutions, and president of New Generation Science and Business Cluster in Lithuania. So the floor is yours.
So my presentation will address the topic about how to deal with digital divide and about cultural and linguistic identity in the digital world. And as the time is running, I will do my short presentation, and I will take some examples from my academic life because I represent University of Applied Social Sciences, and we see real evidences and some obstacles in the young generation, how they deal with technologies and how the world is changing. And also, I'm involved in the National Scientific Program of Humanities and Social Sciences, and also we have some scientific approaches to these issues. So, firstly, to talk about digital Europe, I would say that that's the goal, the strategy, and we cannot avoid the digitalization. It's the real life of all of us, and the only one problem and question I would like to address where we are going to with this, and what social life of individuals will be in the future. And as such a small countries like Lithuania and the other North and Baltic countries, I think the biggest challenge is to preserve our linguistic and cultural identity. We as Lithuanians, having one of the oldest languages in Europe, now we see real evidences in the life and in the academic works of the students that our language is threatened by the technologies. And our Lithuanian students, they don't use the Lithuanian letters, which are unique, and we see that they're changing them. And to preserve language is one of the issues, because digitalization makes some negative impact on this issue. And to keep culture and language, That's the issue and the challenge for all of us. And I would say that the cultural sustainability should be added as one of the sustainability dimensions, because nowadays there's a lot of talk and many strategies, EU strategies and global strategies on sustainability. What is it? And we focus on economic growth, on social dimension, on environmental issues and anti-corruption, but I would like to stress the fact that cultural dimension should be added to the sustainability issue, to the understanding what sustainability is and will be in the future. I mean that the cultural and linguistic identity of the countries also are very relevant to the future sustainability of the world. So mainly there are two aspects, the languages and culture. So firstly, about the language, we all know that the nations stay alive as long as its language. And languages itself conceal a lot of cultural identity. As I told from our experience, from our national experience, we now see from younger generation that the language is, there were some signals of disappearing of languages. And as in Soviet time, when we belonged to Soviet Union, we had some impact of racism and some barbarism coming to our language, but now we see the other side. They disappeared, but now we see the other part of barbarism in our language and disappearing our national language. And for us, for me as a Lithuanian citizen, it's a very important issue. And for such a small country like we are, because it's really our identity. And we are very proud of this, of having one of the oldest language in Europe. So digital literacy influences linguistic illiteracy, and that's the fact, what we see now. In the other case, culture and technologies, Europe and its the old world with many unique cultures. And now when we have this digital society, we can see that the new culture is formed. It's a digital culture. It's like a subculture. And when we talk about young generation, they are living in this internet subculture. That means we need more cultural content to be placed in internet by digital means. Having these issues in mind, 3 years ago in Lithuania, we established Association of Lithuanian Digital Creative Industries to force more content of cultural heritage to be placed by digital means in internet. And that's a very practical way what we do. And in Lithuania last year, together with the cooperation with many companies who are internet providers and with the ministry, with the support of government, we organized Festival of Digital Creative Industries, and also the awards of digital creative industries, with the many nominations in few main fields. The best award for the best digital creative product, and decision. And with this association, we support to create more products which help us to put more cultural content in the internet. As for example, I can say that the best award for best project was awarded to the Orbis Lituania website, which holds about 700 history and myths about Lithuanian ancient history in internet, enriched by many graphic elements and internet decision. So practically in Lithuania, we do this by searching for the best decisions and awarding them for this. And what I would like to ask and suggest for the governments, not to stress in the strategies only technological sciences and technological development, not to forget the synergy between social sciences and technologies. And in this way, social and non-technological innovations could be the right solution for a sustainable future. So that would be my suggestion, and also request from the governments and to not to forget that we are people and we need real social communication, and to use digital means to keep cultural and linguistic content. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this important urge to take attention to the cultural and linguistic development on the cyberspace. And actually, starting this discussion on this topic, I would like to reference to the recent study made by 200 experts across Europe analyzing the situation of European languages and the preparedness for the digital age, and these challenges faced by new technologies, for language should be used in different ways and means, by communicating with computer in your language, by machine translation and automatic text analysis. And the discovery of this challenge of this study is really alarming, because 21 of 30 European languages actually are not prepared for these new requirements and are endangered for extinction in the digital age, meaning not sufficiently used in these digital technologies. And actually this study is recently published by Springer, and let me quote Prime Minister Valdis Dombrovskis, that for such small languages like Latvian, keeping up with the ever-increasing pace of time and technological development is crucial, and the only way to ensure future existence of our language is to provide its users with equal opportunities as the users of larger languages enjoy, and therefore we have to be on the forefront of modern technologies, and it's our opportunity. So I would like to invite all the panelists and participants at this discussion to express your views and comments. Now the floor is open. Yes, please.
Thank you for the presentations, highly interesting, and it's really warming my heart to hear these two experts on the open data issue. My name is Kristin Lyng, and I'm working with the Norwegian Meteorological Institute, and I'm educated a lawyer, and I'm responsible for the open data policy that we have at the Meteorological Institute. And the Met services were mentioned as one area for open data. And we have had this open data policy for 5 years, so we have extensive experience about doing this. And I just want to pick up on some of the fears that was expressed here, that our experience that your worst fear is not going to happen. So being afraid of being exposed to incorrect information in your data, well, use that as a benefit for yourself, for you as a public body. Make the feedback on the incorrections to get them back to you, and make your data better and make it as an improvement. That's one important aspect about opening up the data, that this is a benefit for you as a public body. I would like to add, you had two recommendations Hjalmar, to what you're doing. The first one was make data default open, and the second one was hire a national CTO. I couldn't agree more, but could I please add a third one? You should hire a progressive lawyer to make something about the regulations.
Actually, if I can comment on that, one of the problems we found. So I'm now working with a government group that is that is working on how to implement the open data policies across the government. And one of the issues we found is that the concept of, for example, data not being copyrighted or being put out under Creative Commons licenses or any other open licenses don't exist in our law. So that's been an interesting problem to have. Just the definitions of making something freely available without attribution don't exist. So it's you're absolutely right. There are a lot of legal issues there that need to be solved and laws that need to be written. So.
Just a short comment, tying this discussion on open data and languages in language development. Web is a fantastic source where you can extract the knowledge, how language is used, and how to turn texts into knowledge and information. But to analyze that data, with current copyright regulations and restrictions are prohibiting to use that vast amount of information available on the web. And this is also one of the examples how this regulation should be changed to open the power of the data on the web.
Yeah, a comment on the last presentation, which is very interesting, and where both with languages, also with cultures. But the reality is also that cultures and languages have always been evolving. And if you think about, there's in architecture, in painters, when they travel to different places and met other artists from other countries, they got influenced, and that's how things have been evolving. The same thing with languages. There's a lot of languages, that have roots from, whatever, French language or German language and whatsoever. And I think that's just the reality is that now that I think it's important that we deal with this, but we should also make sure that we don't become protectionistic about it, because there's also a risk that you create a digital divide, if you try to be too protective. I'm thinking about, France is not here in this, but they are very protective, and I think that's prohibitive, and I think we just need to be a bit mindful about that.
Yeah. Thank you for this comment. But if you look on the aspects of language in digital Europe, then we have removed many barriers for having an open digital market in the Europe. But still, we do have the language barriers. And the recent study commissioned by European Commission showed that people usually do not buy services what are presented, and information is available in language what is not their mother tongue. And this is just an example how language barriers are preventing more active e-commerce and services across digital Europe. And we do have powers to remove those barriers by using new technologies.
Or by changing our mother tongue, which I think we should do.
I think that exactly, and where whatever Lisa, whoever was 18 months old, she will not have that problem. I think this is a problem for an aging population. We need to be aware of that, but that is not the future. I can guarantee you that. And so I think that, but this also becomes commercial decisions for companies to localize different languages. And the reality is actually that it's not the languages which is the barriers. It's quite easy for any online service to translate. When we launched Skype, we had it translated to 25 languages in 1 month. We didn't have any translator because we just crowdsourced it, and it worked really well. That's not the problem. The other problems which are more challenging for for e-commerce companies and things like that is because local payment methods and deliveries and VAT and so forth, which are challenges.
Well, yes, I wanted to come back to this first presentation on e-governance and issues, and I just catch the phrase of not letting big companies to sell us things which we don't need. And this is indeed the impression we are sometimes getting when we see the results of our IT developments. But then, do you have any suggestions in a sense? So, how for a governance, which is typically digital non-natives, so to say, which have some idea where they want to go, but probably not very exactly how it's best guns there, and is it really best choice? So, what would you suggest? So, what are the things we would need? Because we're also now developing e-government, developing electronic signature, different electronic services for citizens, for companies, so on and so on. But there's always questions. So, what is the most effective direction in any specific field?
So is the question about the digital immigrants, so to speak, the aging population, and how to get them on board, or did I miss something?
No, I mean more on it's more on general. So what would you see as a priority, as since there is a worry that a big company could sell us something what we don't need? What do you see? What is which direction is a priority? What's really needed to make this e-governance most efficient?
Okay, then I think there are two things that should be done urgently. One is to look at, for instance, what the Brazilian government has done, where they have said that nothing that we develop or implement should be proprietary. Everything should be open sourced. Every kind of application system should be open sourced, and whatever development they make on it should also be open sourced in turn. So you get into another community, and with that comes another mindset of openness. That will immediately disqualify some of the current players who are basically misusing government funding. And the second thing is to actually look at what modern digital companies today are doing. So for instance, Facebook, more than 1 billion users. No one has read a manual about Facebook. No one has attended a class about Facebook, and still everyone manages to use it. The systems that we build from a governmental side should be just as easy to use. So that's basically us lowering the thresholds and lowering the friction. The solutions are out there. We should just start using them and learning from what the good digital companies are doing.
Be continuing on that, this governments can really create then opportunities. You know, the demand-driven policies that you exactly according to those lines, kind of the guidelines that, well, if not everything is kind of open sourced, it can be anyway kind of open interfaces, kind of the APIs and everything is open, and then also smaller players can participate and by purchasing procurement decisions, innovative procurement decisions, you can select kind of the easier, the smaller innovative players. But there we have to be very careful with EU that also the regulations, public procurement regulations, what they are kind of setting on us should be maybe more free or kind of liberal, that you allow governments to really attract these young innovative companies to propose totally radical new innovations. One way how it can be driven, and this is a little bit about this CTO of the country, we established in Finland last spring the kind of the working team, ICT 2015, where we actually the starting point was that we have a lot of ICT players because of the Nokia downsizing, that how to preserve that and how to create work and so forth. But we ended up creating 21 paths to frictionless Finland. 21 paths to frictionless Finland, and exactly pointing out some of the key issues for frictionless government, how to boost some of the strengths in terms of training and so forth and so on, and how to ensure funding of the innovative ideas, and having, in the end, we have a team, a steering team, very small, under Prime Minister, who will look after that these recommendations will be followed even after elections. So this is a 10-year program, and every party leaders, they have committed that, hey, this is a good for Finland, and there is a kind of the sign-off already for the next round of government.
Yeah.
So this kind of thing is a little bit like you proposed, but it requires quite a lot of work that you can really harmonize and put the kind of things straight in ICT area, because this is exactly the problem, is this architectures and all that kind of stuff that you end up spending, and you don't create opportunities for new businesses, new innovations.
Okay. Thank you. And as we have to wrap up.
First of all, I envy you for getting your parties to agree on anything. We can't do that in Iceland. But anyway, very much, I mean, it's a longer term than just the term of a government, so it needs to be a long-term commitment. But on your question about kind of not having companies sell you things you don't need, first of all, corporations aren't evil, by nature, not even big ones, but they have clear incentives. So I think as long as you dictate your own policies and you come up with the requirements and you go out and you seek the best solutions for that, all for openness, all for open data, even more so for kind of, open interfaces and APIs and kind of ways for systems to interact. But the main thing is, don't go, you'll be looking for the best solution to your problem, but just make sure that they aren't selling it to you that you have that problem, and you actually, come up with your own requirements and then find ways to fulfill them. I think that's the key issue.
Probably the last comment.
Yes. Also, just to add on that, I would like to advocate for a business case-driven e-government and a clear vision on your own to where you want to go. In Denmark, we have established a vision. We want to make digital by default for our citizens. We have a goal of 80% of our citizens should service themselves online, and by 2015. We make a lot of these services at the moment mandatory for our citizens, so there's no way around. They have to go online, even for the digital divide. And we actually succeed. We actually bring those citizens we today can see are not online. They are starting coming online. They accept the changes. And of course, there's some we can't grab. Those we have to take care of. But for instance, the disabled are welcoming these changes because the services that we offer online are much better, improved, bringing the services to their homes. They can stay at home, they can service themselves much better. And of course, there's also a great business case in it for the public sector. And in the end, we empower our citizens to service themselves. So there's also something, like you said, of bringing power back to our citizens.
For you. Thank you very much.